The atmosphere editor is a very powerful tool within View. So we're going to hit F4 on the keyboard to go ahead and pull up our atmosphere editor. What we can also do is go up to Atmosphere and then Atmosphere Editor. And if you notice on the top, we have our atmosphere model. And we have three different types of models plus environmental mapping. We have a standard model, volumetric model, and spectral model. And each one of these produce an entirely different type of sky, also different qualities of sky. The standard model will give you the least amount of quality, the volumetric model will give you something a little bit better, and the spectral model will of course be the best quality. Each one of these is controlled a little bit differently. If we take a look at our sun tab, we can see that under spectral model we have an automatic sun color. If we go to our volumetric model, we have the same, and we also have a little bit different options. You can see that under spectral model we have size of corona, and under volumetric model we have sunlight masked by clouds. So we have a lot of different options depending on what it is you want to do. If we go to our standard model, we can select our sun color, and it's not automatic. And we don't have the size of our corona like we would with a spectral model. And under our lighting tab, we can see that we have different types of lighting models. We have a standard model, and these are also based on quality. Global ambience, ambient occlusion, global illumination, and global radiosity. Radiosity is, of course, the best. Second down is global illumination. And it's all different types of ways of creating light and casting light within our scene. Our standard model is just going to cast very, very basic light, and it's not going to take the sky's color into effect once it's lighting your different objects in the scene. And I'm just going to load in a standard terrain so we can see the effect of our sky on this terrain. Now we're going to change it to global ambience, and we can see it darkens up a little bit, but now it's using more of the sky's color to illuminate this object. Ambient occlusion works the same as global illumination. If we take a look at global illumination, we can see a little bit better of effect, and we'll get some different types of shadowing and an overall better look. Now what ambient occlusion will do is produce almost the same type of effect as illumination, except we can adjust our range of shadows. In other words, when objects are near other objects, they'll create shadows, and this way we can adjust the range between objects and their shadows and how much they cast. And then, of course, global radiosity is the bouncing of light. And the easiest way to really see that is if we take, let's go ahead and add a sphere to our scene. And I'm going to make this a very bright color. I'm just going to edit our color map and turn that into a blue and something completely different. And now if we zoom in to our terrain, where we can see it intersecting, the blue light will bounce off of our object and cast those rays onto our terrain. So that's what global radiosity does. We can also adjust the gain on that, increase that effect, which is an overall effect throughout the scene. And then we also have our sky dome lighting gain. So if we feel our scene is not bright enough compared to our sky, we can actually just increase that amount and sort of fake it. And we also have an artificial ambience, which will allow us to adjust our ambient light, which is sort of our faked radiosity light. And it has to do with our ambient occlusion and global ambience. That's pretty much based on the area of our object that is not in direct sunlight, and that is our ambient part. So we can increase that with our artificial ambience. We can also adjust our quality and our light color, ambient color, and a lot of these options are the same throughout the different models. You can see that we lose our auto decay sunlight color once we switch to a spectral model, but that's because we have a whole new tab. You can see that we have our sky, fog, and haze tab under our spectral model, which allows us to adjust our sky and ground density, which will adjust our overall color. And let's take a look at some of these different options we have for actually editing our skies. First thing I'm going to do is actually just close this out right now, and I'm going to delete these objects from our scene. Reposition our camera so we can see the sky in our preview, and then we'll bring back up our atmosphere editor, and we'll take a look at our spectral model. Now we can adjust the sky color. We can edit this color. We can make it, let's just make it sort of a reddish color so we can really see that change. And now by adjusting its density, we can adjust how bright it really is, and then its altitude. So how far do we want that brightness to climb? I'm going to change that back to our blue. or sort of a dark blue. And keep in mind too that the colors that you select can be very, very touchy. So if you're too close to more of a purple, which we can see right here, we'll create more of a purple sky. So I'm going to go to a different type of blue, which is more towards that green and that lighter blue. And we can see that that purple is gone from our sky, at least in our render. Once we refresh our main camera view, we'll see that disappear, and that will update. We can also adjust the decay amount, which allows us to overlay another color. And right now, this default sort of orange color is very good for realistic looking skies. And we can adjust our decay, and then of course its altitude. And a lot of these options are pretty much exactly the same. We have a haze ground density and our haze altitude, our fog density and our fog altitude. And then we have our glow intensity, which has to do with our sun and the overall effect that it's creating in our scene. We'll go ahead and just position ourselves more towards the sun. We can see that with the glow intensity that high, we have a very, very bright looking sky. We can go ahead and tone that down and adjust that glow effect. What we also have is our aerial perspective. What aerial perspective will do is, as we're climbing through the atmosphere, it will turn our sky black. So let's just go ahead and move our camera up towards the sky a little, and now we can see our sky has turned more of a black, as if we're leaving the atmosphere. So that's our aerial perspective, which is very, very cool. And of course we can change our haze color, fog color, and all these different options. It's pretty straightforward. What we also have is our wind tab. And what this will allow us to do is to adjust our wind options for our plants. And we could edit our ecosystems and have them be affected by wind, and it's just very, very cool. And now we're going to go over to our effects tab, where we can add stars to our scene. We can create rainbows, ice rings around our sun, and then this tab is also very important when we have our environment mapping, which will allow us to load in HDRI images to light our scene. And I'm just going to go back and change this to a spectral model, or actually even just close this out, File New, and we're going to select our default sky under Spectral Sunshine, just to reset our scene. And we're going to take a look at the clouds now. There's a lot of different cloud options that we have with each of the different surfaces. So we're going to go back to our atmosphere editor, go to our cloud tab, and now we can either add our basic types of clouds, or we can add spectral clouds, which are completely volumetric. So I'm going to go to Add, and now we have all of our different cloud options. We can add spectral clouds, our cumulus clouds, we can do stratus, volumetric clouds, which are volumetric, but they don't look as good as spectral clouds, but they can still, of course, be used and blended together. Any one of these clouds can be used in any of the models except the spectral. We can use volumetric clouds and regular standard clouds within the standard model, volumetric model, and spectral, but spectral clouds have to be used with the spectral model, otherwise they will not work. Those are also connected to the meta clouds, so it's all sort of tied together. We also have our meta cloud materials in here as well, so that we can change those. But I'm going to select a spectral cloud and click low clouds right now, and click OK. And now we can see we have these very, very nice clouds in our atmosphere, which we can change their scale if we want to, their altitude, their height, and we also get a preview in our front view. If we go ahead and zoom out, and we can see this big gray area, and what that's defining is our clouds, altitude, and height. So if we lower our altitude, we can see that lower just a little. If we adjust our height, we can see that grayness, that gray bar sort of disappear and get a little bit smaller. We could also make that a lot larger, and you can see it just creates different types of clouds. Depending on that height and altitude, we can actually adjust our function to make it look completely different. So that's something to really play around with. We also have our cover and our density, opacity, detail amount, altitude variations, ambient lighting, shadow density. Our shadow density, what we can see is actually casting shadows on the ground from our clouds. And we can see all these different shadows on the ground. And that's because these are low clouds. And with low clouds, we can adjust our shadow density and change the overall effect of our cloud. and how much the shadows are actually affecting our scene. So there's a lot we can do with it, and we can also adjust our cloud animation within here. So we can adjust our direction, the velocity, and the rate of change. And that's all automatic, and it will automatically adjust your clouds to create a very, very nice fluid looking animation. What we can also do is add in more cloud layers, and we can adjust their altitude and height, and all the same options that we had before. We can just blend those together. Another really, really cool thing that we can do is actually go up into the clouds. So I'm going to move our camera into our clouds, and we can fly through them. We can see them from above, and they're completely volumetric and very, very realistic looking. So that's a very cool thing we can do. And if you want to learn to create a little more complex different types of clouds and atmospheres, what I would suggest doing is just loading in some of the atmospheres that are already available and just take a look at them and see how they were made, because that's probably the best way to learn how to create your own atmospheres, is to see what other people have done and what they've created, so you know what sort of changes will affect your sky and what exactly you need to edit in order to make things look the way you want them to. Another thing you can also do is even load in these different presets and save out their clouds. So if you liked a specific cloud in one atmosphere model and you like the color of another one, what you could do is save out these clouds. So we're going to go to the atmosphere editor. You can see we have this cumulus. If we right mouse click, we can click save material. So you can save all of these clouds out and load them in with any of the materials or atmospheres that you want and just sort of mix it up together.